On part 3 of this series of surrender, we're going to be talking about today about obstacles of surrender on Soul 02. And welcome to Soul 02. This is a podcast that is putting the oxygen back into the Christian life one soul at a time. And today we're talking about 5 obstacles to surrendering. And this is a 4-part series on surrender that we're doing, and we have 2 parts left. And I start with the words of Jesus. He said in Matthew 16, he said this, "Then Jesus told his disciples, 'If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it.'" And we find that in the scripture, there is no hiding of the price tags. This is why so many people, they don't like the church, but they love Jesus because there's no hypocrisy in him. There's no presumption or pretense in him. He just tells you exactly what he requires. And C.S. Lewis once talked about human nature when he said these words. He said, "There are only 2 kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, 'Thy will be done,' and those to whom God says in the end, 'Thy will be done.' All that are in hell choose it." And that's a very heavy way to say it, But really, when you think about it, the very heart of who we are, the very foundation of Christianity is surrender. Without surrender, there is no Christianity. There's no real, authentic Christianity without giving everything that I am to God. And today, many Christians have the idea that salvation, as it were, only entails, giving my life to Jesus. And Lord, just save my soul. And that surrender to Jesus is basically optional. And so the words of Jesus about losing your life never seem to connect with the reality that salvation and surrender go together. You can't have one without the other, really. And I've never really believed in the idea of, well, maybe you've given him your life, but you haven't surrendered. I don't believe in that. I believe he either has you or he doesn't. And surrender can be defined this way: the abandoning of one's inmost being to God. If God has your inmost being, basically, that's common sense. If he has your inside, the most important part of you, then basically he has you. But there are some sticking points. And some people were asked this very question. And in their great book on surrender, Nancy Leigh DeMoss and Jim Cymbala came across these questions that people ask about surrender. Some people were asked this question, what's hard about surrender? And this was their answer, basically. Some say, well, personal possessions. I don't know if I can give that up. Spending habits, personal opinions, children leaving home, schedule and time, health and physical concerns, addictive habits, the right to control or change a mate, loss of parents through death, unforgiveness, anger, and many more things. These are just a few of things. But so today, what are some obstacles to surrender? Well, the first I would call psychological, that kind of dovetail to some of the questions I just asked, I just came across earlier. Basically, psychological questions are questions that get me stuck in my thinking of why I can't surrender. What about fear of the costs? I don't know if I want to follow Jesus. It costs me too much. Any Christian who hasn't considered the cost honestly, you wonder, do you really know Jesus if you haven't really come across that point where you ask yourself, is this worth it? Because Jesus will ask for everything. And in its very strict sense, according to society, Christianity, real Christianity, authentic Christianity is really a cult, because no one else asks for more full surrender than Jesus. He asked not only for your soul, but for your body, right? Your body a living sacrifice. He asked for your mind, every thought captive. Who else does that? That's cultic in a sense. And but if it's for Jesus, who is the embodiment of truth, I don't care what they call it. It's the truth. But some fear the cost. What if I give up my drinking or drugs, some think? What will I do about the emptiness it leaves behind? Others might say, what if I stop that habit? I know it's wrong. How will I de-stress? How will I fill the void? Some might say, isn't this kind of cultic to talk about giving your rights up to God? Because, hey, we're Americans, we're Westerners, and we believe in rights, and we worship our rights. And absolutely, it's right, because that's what God requires, and that's it. There's no apology, no nothing. That's the price, period, right? Some might say, I have never trusted anyone in my life. How could I trust God with everything when he says, give me everything? Nicodemus struggled with psychological reasons when Jesus said, you must be born again. And he's like, how can I enter back into my mother's womb? How can I go back up the birth canal and be reborn? That doesn't make sense. He had psychological reasons. So you must consider the cost of putting everything you are at God's feet. And it says in Luke 14, I think I have it here, Luke 14:26. Anyone who comes to me but refuses to let go of father, mother, spouse, children, brothers, sisters, yes, even one's own self, can't be my disciple. Anyone who won't shoulder his own cross and follow behind me can't be my disciple. I mean, that's just what I love about Jesus. Whatever your problems are with the church, maybe, or complaints, you can't fault Jesus. He is the embodiment of truth, and there's no shadow of turning in him. There's no hypocrisy in him. It's a beautiful thing. Now, the cost of not surrendering is greater than surrendering, because if we want all of God, then God has to have all of us. But here's another reason: idolatrous reasons. And idolatry, we know, is a common word. Most people know what it is, really. And it's more than worshiping a statue or bowing down to something physically. But what about worship of the individual? Again, in Western culture especially, and America especially, worshiping the individual is a very serious thing. It's a sacred thing. And Patrick Carroll and Dan Sanchez define individualism this way. Individualism is a philosophy that views people first and foremost as unique individuals rather than as members of a group. It emphasizes the importance of independence, individuality, and autonomy. And you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, maybe in the strictest sense, nothing. But when it becomes an idol where it's my way or the highway, and I don't want to give up my way of what God wants, then there's a problem. And some Christians think that surrender only consists of giving God my troubles. Just give it all to Jesus, all your troubles. And God says, I want more than your troubles. I want your life. I want your heart. And we also have the idolatry of consumerism, under idolatrous reasons. And there's many idols, but these are big American ones. I had a friend who did his PhD on the individual and on consumerism, which I think is amazing, on how they're idols in our culture. But society's obsession with acquiring consumer goods and being defined by having stuff, right? More equals better. If I have more, if I have bigger, if I have greater, more richer, then I'm better. And many have given into that lie. And these things keep us from surrender, because God is saying, I want all of you. I want all of what you have so that I can do whatever I want with it. But what about this one? Obstacle to surrender. Substituting commitment for surrender. A theologian by the name of Yosef San, said that in the 1950s and 60s in America, there was a shift from the call to surrender to a call to commitment. And it became this fine distinction. And he explained this. He explains it this way. He said, a Christian surrender means that a person lifts his or her hands and says to God, here I am, surrender, take over. I belong to you. But in America, the country of the individual people, this is the place of nobody should command me. I belong only to myself. Therefore, preachers who wanted more results and wanted them in big numbers felt, and they basically gave into the temptation to soften the demand, to reduce the cost, and to make the message more palatable. So they used the word commitment instead of surrender. Because commitment, really, when you think about it, commitment means I can give stuff to God, but I remain my own. But surrender says I give myself to God and he has everything else as well. Big difference. And so that's a clear distinction. But here's another one here. What about going only halfway, half measures? Surrender that is self-serving, right? That is basically, this is what I want. I'll give God so much. I'll give God, just maybe my troubles, my tribulations, my fears, my doubts, my depression. I'll give him my guilt, my family problems, my marriage problems, my job problems, my financial problems, my fears, my anxieties. You can go on and on with this. And I will give God my bad habits and all these things. And it's possible to give God 99.9% of everything and still hold on to the most important thing, myself. And that is a distinction, isn't it? God never accepts half measures. Watchman Nee once said, today, even among Christians, and this was the 1800s or early 1900s, he said, there can be found much of the spirit that wants to give as little as possible to the Lord and yet to get as much as possible from him. What he is after is that we pour out all we have ourselves to him. And if that be all, it is enough. And then lastly, excuses. This is a big barrier to not commitment. Okay, commitment's the weak word, right? To surrender. Excuses are a big barrier to surrender. And think of the great wedding feast in Luke 14, where it says Jesus said someone great gave this great dinner, and there was a casual banquet, and this was the event of the ages, a place where God was inviting people to the table and saying, if you refuse this will have eternal consequences. And then in Luke 14:18, it says, but they all alike began to make excuses. The verse said, I have bought a piece of land and I must go to see it. Please accept my regrets. Another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm going to try them out. Please accept my regrets. Another said, I have just married, therefore I cannot come. So when it says they all alike, it makes you think about the idea that all these excuses were part of a common culture, that this was the way we excuse ourselves in this culture. But it was absurd because in the face of such urgency, these excuses seem silly. And all excuses are silly in the face of in the face of eternity, rather. And that leads me to the next part. There's 3 parts to it. 3 excuses. The first is entrepreneurship. The land could have waited, right? But instead they said, well, I'm a businessman. I got to do my business, so I got to check out this land. The other one was work. Well, I have so many hours at work. I got to just get this done. I got 3 cars I got to pay for. So he could have maybe taken care of the oxen tomorrow, right? So, and the third one was domestic life. And he was looking for a loophole because in the Old Testament, if a person was married, they were off from obligations for a year. And so these were just excuses, and they seem silly in the face of eternity. So I see all that to say this, that as we navigate our lives, and God is requiring all of us, we must invite the Holy Spirit to remove our hindrances. And we must surrender, our true surrender, that just doesn't commit to certain things that are Christian or religious or, just church culture, but that he has my actual heart. He has the beating heart of who I am. And Mark 9:23 says, Jesus said to them, if you are able, all things can be done for the one who believes. Immediately the father of the child cried out, I believe, help my unbelief. And this is an honest cry because surrender is not easy. Most of my life, I feel like I'm at a tug of war with God, with my own will. So I say, Lord, help my unbelief, help my stubbornness, help the part of me that doesn't want to give up. And Hannah Whitehall Smith once said it beautifully. She said, it is wonderful what miracles God works in wills that are utterly surrendered to him. He turns hard things into easy and bitter things into sweet. It is not that he puts easy things in the place of the hard things, but he actually changes the hard thing into an easy one. That's an amazing thing when you look at it. Surrender changes her whole lens, perspective, and everything. So if you like this podcast, please leave a like and connect with us. We are on YouTube and Buzzsprout, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Facebook, and others. And check us out. And if you like this podcast, please recommend it to a friend and let's grow it. Okay. Thanks and great to be with you. God bless you.